Yeah, so those messages where you really focus on the other person, like you give them the you message, and it's like, let me really look at you and inspire people to higher values really helps. So we're going to look at HTML and semantic HTML, and we're going to learn what these different HTML elements right here, their characteristics. So this is quotations and right out of MDN, Mozilla Developer Network documentation. And so a header we're just going to be reading like the definition. A header is for a group of introductory content or navigational aids, but may contain some heading elements, but also other elements like a logo. Must not be a descendant of header, footer, or address. So let me teach you this. So when you go to MDN header, like what can go where on an HTML page? MDN header. In here, we have this blue area, which looks a little intimidating, right? Content categories, flow content, palpable content. I don't know what the hell they're talking about. I'm just going to skim over that, right? Like, what is that stuff? Permitted content, flow content, but with no header or foot or descendant. I'm sticking with divs. You know, it's like, what is this stuff? All right, well, let's dig into it, and I'll show you. So here's content categories, flow content. We come here, and then we're like, what? Huh? What? What? Flow content, heading, sectioning, embedded, interactive. This looks like Meet George Jetson. Like, you know, kind of like 1960s space art or something, you know? Like Gateway to the Future at Disneyland. This might be on your cup when you get a Coke. No? A lot of circles, right? That's my takeaway. And so that, to understand that, flow content, elements, and we've already learned about document flow. Elements belonging to flow content category typically contain text or embedded content. They are anchor, so that's an inline element, right? And then all these other ones. So these are just the tags that belong to flow content. Okay, cool. All right, what other content? So flow content with no header or footer. So content categories, header can contain any of these elements and except header or footer. Right? That's the content that's permitted. Parents, permitted parents. So any parent of header, any element that accepts flow content, note that a header element must not be a descendant of an address, footer, or another header element. So header can't be a child of address, footer, or another header, but anything else that accepts flow content, header can go into, because header is flow content. You see that right there, header's flow content. Is that the only place header is on the page? There's header, it's flow content, and elements belonging to the sectioning content model create a section in the current outline that defines the scope of header elements, footer elements, and heading contents. So sectioning content. Do not confuse the content model with the sectioning root category, which isolates content from regular outline. Elements belonging to this category are article, aside, nav, and section. So elements belonging to sectioning content are article, section, aside, and nav. So elements belonging to sectioning create a section in the current outline that defines the scope of header elements, footer elements, and heading content. Article, aside, nav, and section. And article, aside, nav, and section, we have article right here. That's also flow content. We have article aside right there also. We have nav right here. And we have section right here. So article, aside, nav, and section are also flow content. And they're also sectioning content, which is why when we look at this picture, flow content, right? Sectioning content is also flow content. Flow holds anything that is sectioning. So anything that's type sectioning is also type flow. All right, so these define the scope of header and footer elements. Article, aside, nav, and section define the scope of header and footer. What does that mean? What does that mean? that article aside nav and section define the scope of header and footer. What does that mean? Let me ask the question again. Article aside nav, article section nav and aside, article section aside nav define the scope. Article section aside nav define the scope of header and footer. What's that mean? When we talk about variable scope in programming, what is that? So in programming, scope means where does that variable live? Where is it accessible? So the scope of the variable Todd McLeod, which is associated with this entity, right, is planet Earth. Not Everest. Not above like 20,000, 12,000, 15,000 feet. No. Unless I'm in airplane with pressure. Right? But it's pretty much planet Earth is my scope. It's where I live. If I create a variable, then, you know, the scope of that variable is like a certain area. So in programming, I have a variable x. It stores a value of type string equal to Todd, and I could print that out. I can't print it right here. X is undefined on line 8. Line 8, vertical position 14. 1, 2, 3, 4, I think that's probably 14. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Close. Right? But x is undefined. Because the scope of x is from here to there. That's where that variable lives. If this had been in a different function, right? Call foo. Cool. Now the scope is from here to there. This won't work either, just like we saw before. And this won't work. X doesn't live there. The scope of x is from here to there. So that's scope in variables. And you limit your scope in programming because you don't want your variables colliding. You don't want like global variables where somewhere in the program that got another value assigned to it. I don't know where. That's like 13,000 lines of code. Good luck figuring that out.
This is Golang, right?
Yeah. Go's awesome, dude.
It looks a lot different than Java.
Yeah. Go's so
Really,
beautiful.
That's what we would have been learning if it was the other class that I would
Yeah.
learn, right?
Yeah.
I'll take that one next time.
Yeah, in the spring.
Yeah, definitely.
We got 94, I think, in the spring. And if you want to get started on that, Greater Commons right there. Yeah, what's up? I think it's just 94, but very similar content. So that's scope. So what does it mean that article aside nav and section define the scope of header and nav? That means that when we use header and footer inside of article aside nav and section, that is the header or footer for article aside nav or section. So we could have a header and a footer inside an article. We can have a header or footer inside a section. How do we know that from the documentation? Well, permitted content is flow content with no header or footer descendant. So we can't have a header or footer inside of a header. But we can have any other flow content. And so we could have inside of a header, we could have a header, aside, nav, section, but also header, aside, nav, and section. Let's look at those. This is the point I was trying to make. I got a little confused there. Article, permitted contents, any flow content. Aside, any flow content. Nav, any flow content. And section, any flow content. Well, a header and a footer are flow content. And this is telling us that header and footer, right, their scope is defined by these. So we could put header and footer in any of those. Article, aside, nav, section. I don't know if it makes sense to have a header, footer inside of a nav. I don't know if I'd do that. But that's sectioning. And they could have headers and footers. And the parent of header, this is another way to do it, any element that accepts flow content can be its parent, because header is flow content. Note that a header element must not be a descendant. Header must not be a descendant of an address, footer, or another header. But it's totally fine to put header inside of article, section. We could put header inside of any element that accepts flow content other than address, footer, or header.
So if you're going aside.
Yeah. So it's just kind of interesting. Just like, how can I verify if I can do that or can't do it? And that's the people who make code editors or browsers, right? They look at that and they have to implement that properly. That's the header element.